Powhatan area was one of their holy spots. So how do you sell that and you can't even to somebody? They say, oh yeah, yeah. I'm sure what Powhatan said was, sure, yeah, just give me that copper right there. You can do whatever you want. I don't even really think he understood that. Because what happened was a native boy was hunting there. He wasn't supposed to be there because they had this piece of paper from their Wesseroans, their king, which is a local king of the Powhatans, the actual local tribe that was in Richmond. And that was Powhatan was the actual, which is Tsenacommacah's son. Basically just sold Richmond to Captain John Smith for some pieces of copper. So they were basically getting these pieces of paper. Once the English got this legitimate piece of paper that they thought was a legitimate right according to their culture, according to their society, but according to the natives' culture, they had no comprehension of this. They just didn't understand it. And so there was a lot of these things happening. What happened was when the other colonials, they start selling tracts of land. And that's how we got Henrico, and that's how we got Verona. So we got these areas. They start selling tracts of land to Englishmen in England. They was getting on ships and coming over here to see what they purchased. And of course they get here, and there's a native there with a bow and arrow, hunting all over the land, just running around making noise like a native would with bow and arrows, buck naked, whatever they were doing. And of course the Englishman, he wasn't used to that. He wasn't used to people trespassing. That's an English cultural thing. And so what they would do is shoot the native. Just shoot him. You're on my land, get off. Shot him. And of course, the local people will go back to Powhatan and say, hey, look, what did you do with these people? Because now all of a sudden, they claim they had the right to shoot us, and all we're doing is going to our traditional hunting grounds and hunting. And every time we go there, now that you did this agreement with them, they're just open range on us. They shoot us. They kill us with their long guns. But then what the English would say, well, we got this contract here. You're gonna honor it because we made an agreement. You got that piece of copper. So this is now ours. And so, you're talking about a whole city was given to the colonials this way. Now, again, was it given or was it trickery? Well, the natives had no idea what the heck they were doing. You know, they didn't even understand what money was. They had no money system. They didn't understand what trade was. And they didn't even understand the concept that you could sell somebody some land and then it wouldn't be shared amongst everybody. They shared everything. They could they could build a house somewhere. Then the native could pick up and move somewhere else near another tribe, maybe some distance away, but there was no border lines. There was nothing like that. So it really was cultural shock big time going on. And the people that was getting shocked the most was the Tsenacommacahs. There was all kinds of treaties. There was a treaty of Kakakohisi, basically with dissolved. That was the Wesseroans who basically signed a piece of paper that I don't even think he knew he was signed, that basically abolished the Tsenacommacahs. This was after the death of Opakshana. So the preceding kings was elected by the British, and they were elected based on their stupidity. In other words, instead of the native people, they had passed so many laws, instead of the native people being able to pick their own kings and their own leaders, they could pick them, but then they had to get approved by the British. And the British would approve you based on the fact that were you a docile person, were you a stupid person, that kind of thing. And so your leaders start making all kinds of all of a sudden after Powhatan Tsenacommacah and Tsenacommacah died, the leaders started making very bad deals with the English. And of course, by this point, they're the children of Powhatan Tsenacommacah, because again, he was 92, he was 100, so you're dealing with the children of these people who had learned English. They had about 50 years. They probably grew up with multi-language, the first bilinguals in the New World. They could speak in the Tsenacommacah language, but they always also, to some extent, had exposure to English, and they could at least speak to the English and negotiate some type of deals with them. So a lot of the bad dealing is once they had enough of grasp on the language to make bad deals, they start giving away Richmond and Henrico and Verona, and major areas. And also they ultimately gave up Tsenacommacah, and that became Elizabeth City. So it was a lot of Decepticon things where the natives just didn't understand, buying and selling the way the English did. And of course, when the natives came back and said, "Oh, bad deal, I don't want this deal no more," they were just taken to court, found guilty. The native protested. Okay, he did something violent. And of course, now we have to hang you. So that's the kind of thing that was going down. That's how it was going down. Even back then, it's kind of like some similar echoes to what's going now. But ultimately, this became a pattern in America that seemed to persist even till today. It's basically trickery, and then when the trick is figured out by whoever's been tricked, they would complain, they would get no resolution. This person would erupt in violence, kind of like we see what's going on with some of these riots now. And then once that happens, there will be a reprisal, whereas some people going to get hurt, and it's going to be the people that's not the desirable people, let's put it that way. And or not the natives and not certain people. So a lot of this was going down. But a lot of the natives, they were hunting, but they also grew corn, maize, you can call it maize, and they also grew squash, various beans and things like that, pecans. They had various crops of food that they specialized in. Again, his title was called Matoaka. That's not chief. That's basically the king of all the Tsenacommacah tribes, all 31 tribes. It was called Matoaka. The Pamlicotos was basically a Powhatan tribe, or the Tsenacommacah tribe, but the colonizers got along with them a little bit better, killed less of them, but the other natives, no such luck. They didn't get along too much. And so it began to get very difficult, because you had some natives that were very, very, very friendly. Not just friendly, extremely friendly. Then you had some natives that were very hostile. Not a little bit hostile, very. Now, did these natives who were hostile, did they have a good reason to be? Yes. Most of the time, the English group that they encountered didn't realize another English group had already encountered them and killed some of their people. So there was usually justification for the hostilities with the natives. They just weren't hostile just because they wanted to be. They were just generally hostile because there was no trust. The trust had eroded. The men were said to have very handsome physiques by the colonials. And they had strong shoulders and very tall, lean bodies, muscular bodies. And this is by many of the explorers, including John Smith, have reported this. Many of the English who were learning the area, patrolling the area, and scouting the area was testifying to this on this regard. So there we have it with that. So what I'm doing is I'm able to block out quite a bit of the legs today. And what I'm doing is having to go in and clean out my my little medium cups, because they're getting gobbled up quite a bit by my brushes and the paints, because I'm basically painting into some of these sections. It's basically my gesso layers, and that tends to soak up quite a bit of medium. Right now I'm about out of medium, so I'm going to mix my medium from scratch. I had some already prepared in this bucket here, in this little cup. And I tend to use as my medium Galkit, linseed oil, refined linseed oil, and Galkit, which is basically a flour-based substitute. It has a very nice smell. And my studio does not smell like turpentine because I use Gamsol instead of turpentine, which is biologically friendly. Hello, how's it going, Amy Noel? Good to see you. Good to see you. I'm glad you can come to my studio and be a part of my painting experience. I am talking and teaching history and painting all at the same time. Also, if you go to Stephen Foreman YouTube, I have a YouTube channel as well, so go and subscribe to that. I will be making edited versions of some of this and posting that to YouTube as well. So I would really appreciate any support that you could give me by going to YouTube and subscribing to my YouTube channel. So you guys could do that. That would be great. Okay, what I do is I mix about 30% Galkit, and I mix about 20% linseed oil. That's my chemistry for my, and I use the Gambling Galkit, about 20% linseed oil. Then the rest of it is Gamsol, which is a turpentine substitute, and it smells like water. It has absolutely no smell at all. No strong smell, I should say. Then I have this little baby spoon here that I stir it all up with. Really good. And that is my medium. That's the medium that I use. Just going to put a little bit more Gamsol in it. I don't want it so oily because this is my 50. Make sure it's 50% or more because that's my proportions. Because, you know, fat over lean, I don't want too much fat on my foundational levels, but I do want some oil in it to give it some luster. I like my paint that even on my foundational levels, I like them to have some, I try to build up like a jewel-like effect of paint coming from the surface out, you know. And so that's basically my mixture. 20% linseed oil, 30% Galkit, and 50% Gamsol. And I love Gambling paints because they're basically oil paints, but, which I like oil a lot better than acrylic. I sometimes paint in acrylic, but here lately I've been painting quite extensively in oil. But I have a little small acrylic set over there that I might start building back out, and some projects I may start painting in acrylic just to, you know, keep all my options open. I'm always experimenting with different mediums. I don't like to just be stuck with one thing, I like to kind of spread the love, so to speak. But basically, all of the Atlantic seaboard fall line is the Tsenacommacah people. Also, another name for the Powhatan is Powhatan. See, a lot of times, like I say, the English couldn't say those names so easy. So those names disappeared. All we know is Powhatan. How about the Powhatan? And again, if there were some villages that wasn't known by Smith, they just weren't known. That don't mean that they didn't exist. He might have even mentioned these villages or these cities, actually, because sometimes these cities, one city could have 20,000 people in it. And then that would be a tribe. 20,000 people, that's a small little nation, especially if you compare it to Europe at the time. In terms of population, that would be like any city in Europe, comparatively. I mean, with a decent nice little population there. Population was much different than it is now. So these tribes were just decimated in terms of their population because, again, when you come in with superior military, it's very easy to eliminate people. And then, of course, after the fact, when your historians look on what they've done, they have to say something. Oh, yeah, it was disease. There was a lot of diseases that, and like I said, I don't believe so because, again, Powhatan Tsenacommacah lived to be 92, never suffered the disease once. And he just died of old age. And Tsenacommacah lived to be 100. And he didn't die of old age. He was actually shot in the back by a colonial. So these people were very healthy. And he was fighting almost every minute. So when did he have a chance? When is it reported that he got sick and they couldn't fight? Well, it wasn't reported that wasn't in the report because it never happened. So a lot of times you get these historians, they really want to apologize for the ruthless people. And it's not fair to the people who became the victims to have a false tale that makes a certain group of people feel better. Because if these things happen, they happen. I mean, you have to tell the truth. And my grandma, Mabel Anderson, used to say, tell the truth and shame the devil. And so I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. And I think sometimes the devil don't want to know what even he's so bad, he don't even want to know what he's doing wrong. He's scared himself, so he got to give a false narrative. He has to tell a different story. And no, you got to. I think at a certain point you got to own. You got to own what was done. Somebody's got to own it. It was done. Somebody did it. Well, what's just going to happen all the time? People are going to do atrocities, and then they're going to try to write it out away. They're going to say, "Oh, this never happened." It's going to become normal to do that because it's been done before with success so many times, and people just accept it. So who knows who's going to be the victim of the next atrocity? So it's a good idea to want to find out the true history, the true events that happen, so that these atrocities don't happen again. So that the bad behavior doesn't repeat itself. else what's going to happen is you're going to get awful behavior, because humans are basically advanced animals. I mean, let's face it. We like to see ourselves as evolved beings, you know, something close to God, so to speak. But the reality of what we actually do is far less than that. It's much closer to the animal. Not that much different from a lion or a gorilla or a chimp or a moose or a deer or whatever. Not that much different. About the same thing. So, again, the Powhatans were another small little tribe near the Powhatans. And they lived on both sides of what is now the James River in Henrico County. And their main village was right there in Henrico. And their chief was Creed. Now, I have a grandfather named Creed. Creed. Of course, what happens is things become anglicized, and people pronounce things according to the English way. But it's just really interesting that to see how languages and names get passed down, and it even changed through the years. And then the whole language disappeared, but these little words and these little names kind of stick around. Nobody knows quite exactly how they are, but there they are. And then eventually, thanks to various scholars, you get to learn what the names actually mean. You know, or you get to or it's expanded upon. The meaning of the name is expanded upon. Now, William Strickey is another person other than Captain John Smith and John Rolfe, who was an explorer who was picking up a lot of information about the natives. He did the best job, I guess, of one of the better jobs of documenting the 1607 natives when he first got there than anybody else. He probably did even a better job than John Smith. Now, I think Strickey had a little bit more contact with the person who was the translator, who was able to probably all three of these people worked together quite a bit to learn how to conquer the natives, to learn the natives so they could conquer them. Because if you look at John Smith's notes, most of his information was about, most of the stuff he was collecting was about how many warriors, how much it's going to take for us to kill these people. So they weren't interested in how many potters is in this village, how many people are making pottery, how many people are planting and making food. They were interested in how many warriors. And who is the boss? And if he was the boss, was he smart or was he dumb? Was he a strong warrior? Was he old? Was he young? So it was definitely collecting information with the purpose of conquest. So when we find population numbers, they were really focusing on the men. They were focusing on the men who could fight. They were focused on anybody that looked like they might have been in the warrior class of the natives. Anybody, even if they weren't a warrior, like I said, they might have been a potter. They might have been some type of, clothing, a shoemaker amongst the natives, or he could have made arrowheads, or could have done a whole lot of other occupations the native men had. But Smith and Strickey, William Strickey, they were interested in, John Smith, William Strickey was interested in how many warriors. So every time when you go looking at the information, they're listing how many warriors, where are they located at. So when you go back with your soldiers, you know exactly where to go to blast them away, blast that little village away. So what you were doing, you was going with a little child, and the little child would show you where the little village is, and you would kind of sneak up and spy on the village and kind of figure out exactly how many warriors was there. So they didn't really, it was not like it was a friendly relationship. They were literally spying on the natives. The natives oftentimes may not even known that Smith was watching them from the woods or somewhere, you know. And oftentimes the men themselves, the native men, were not even at the village. It was just the women there. So, you just didn't have that many, that much real information, other than from a very, very English point of view, and from the point of view of a mercenary. That's what Captain John Smith was. He was a mercenary who was really mostly interested in going in there and cannon firing that whole village away to oblivion at some later date. That's essentially what they were interested in doing. But they had to get this equipment to the, they didn't want to just go exploring with all this heavy equipment. What they were doing, they was going lightweight. Then they would find where a village is. Then they would return with their cannons and various things, and they just simply will destroy the village. It's essentially what that's kind of what their modus operandi, you know. And so Smith was not necessarily the friend of Powhatan Tsenacommacah. He just was the friend of Powhatan Tsenacommacah when he got captured. Or when he got the upper hand, however, most of the time it ended with whatever chief or king or warrants dying. It was too late then to figure out if he was friendly or not. I thought when I last visited you were friendly, but now that I don't, you know, the native is like, now that I don't have the upper hand and you do, okay, now you're trying to kill me. It's too late now. The native is learning learning too late that he was in a bad position. Not in a good position there. And so, yes, they tried to trade with them. They appeared to be friendly as much as they could, as long as the native had the upper hand. But the second the native did not have the upper hand, it was a whole different story going on. Now you have Warwick Square Shire, or Warwick Square Village or City, which is now Isle of Wight area of Richmond. That's another tribe that's basically present-day Smithfield, Virginia. And then they also had a Skylight Village. So a lot of these nations or tribes, you know, when a son gets of a certain age, he might move 15, 20 miles down the way, you know, down the river. But they still were genetically the same people, and they still were beholden to the same warrants. So primarily, when we give these locations, that's primarily where these tribes live. Again, mostly to Smith and Trakee, but however, these people were all over the place. And some tribes had like 19 different villages, 20. Some of them only had one, when I say village, city, one general area. Some of them had 19, 20, and more. It really depends on how that particular works. It depends on how much he wanted to expand his his nation, his particular, I guess that would be like a state for us now, or a major city. And it depends on if he got along with his neighbors well, you know. So, you know, and if he got along, they were exchanging sons and daughters between each other. And they were combining and becoming one group. You know, basically, what happened was the daughter was often given because that would make the son have to come to that tribe to join. You joined the tribe of the daughter. You did not join the tribe. The daughter didn't join the tribe of the man. The man joined the tribe of the daughter. That's kind of how it worked. A lot of tribes lived along the James River, which is called the Powhatan River. Just like a lot of tribes live along the Mattaponi and the Pamunkey River as well. And that they stem from the York River. So not every village, not every group of these particular tribes, if you was to actually go do research, not every one of these groups were recorded. Some of these tribes never got exposure to the colonizers. They kept their distance. They would just simply move upriver, literally. Just move upriver. You know, I'm pretty sure it was stuff like rumors going through the area. Well, these new strange people, they're heading this way. They're only about so much down the way. And the people would just pick up their village and move elsewhere. And so even though a tribe might have lived in a certain way, and then all of a sudden in a certain place, they might be all of a sudden the whole city. I mean, 20,000 strong plus might get up and literally move. Again, they had cleared off this land, so there's a tremendous amount of grasslands that these cities would leave, these groups would leave behind, which is great land for farming and or livestock. So, and of course they use fire. They chop down trees and use fire to clear off a lot of this land. And the people actually who did that mostly were the women. Again, the men spent more time hunting. And what happened was they would send the women first to pick out a new area. And the women would kind of clear off a new area and get it going. And the men would come later with food and other things to kind of solidify the place a little bit. And the Kiskiak, Shishiak, and Kiskiak were various different tribes, but very similar. Now, these tribes were cousin tribes to each other. They were different, but the same, depending on how the various kings and warrances made their treaties with each other, made their agreements with each other. But they could almost be the same people. But many, many tribes of the Tsenacommacah, out of the 31 tribes, many of those tribes are today extinct. And the only two tribes that are still, that never lost their recognition by the state of Virginia was the Mattaponi and the Pamunkey. Just recently, I think the Tsenacommacah had become reinstated as a tribe, or recognized, I should say. Before that, they were just a group of people who tended to live in a certain region of Virginia. And Tsenacommacah, their capital, was taken by the colonials because it was prime farmland. And the natives had the prime farmland for hundreds of thousands, who knows, tens of thousands of years before the British came. And what happened was they just, once Opine Chicano was not on the scene no more, they just took it. And even though that was the area of the kings, Tsenacommacah, it was taken, never given back, and it became part of Jamestown, a part of Elizabeth settlement. And the Mattaponi was one of the largest and most powerful tribes within the Confederacy. And so was the Pamunkey. Okay, and I basically got a few feathers to put in. I think saving a lot of that for last. But also is like managing my palette. So I only have like maybe the arrows and the hand and some feathers and a little bit more of Popek Chicano's wardrobe to kind of block off. And then I'll probably start focusing one element at a time, doing the modeling stage where I start to add more details and kind of start to focus the painting. Right now the painting is, there's paint everywhere. There's no more white that much. And so basically that's what I like, because now I have a painting. I don't just have a white area that I'm coloring in. And then also I can develop, what I like to do is develop the painting together. I like to develop all of the elements and bring them into focus. I don't like to go left to right or top to bottom and stuff like that. And just get it really, really sharp, a lot of details. Because a lot of times, by the time you get to the other side, your painting is starting to morph into something else, because it's hard to keep that continuity from day to day, in a painting of this big. So it's better to actually block the painting off, and then that way you get a lot of continuity. Like when I paint the sky, that's all in one day. So the thoughts that I'm having about how I'm making the sky is consistent. Okay, and then of course when I block off all the other areas, those thoughts are consistent. And then when I gesture in where everything's going to be, so I kind of know where everything's going to be in the painting. Where is it going to, does this sit in the painting right? Does this composition look right? Okay, then once I have that, then I can start refining and sharpening the elements and making them look more realistic and things like that. And then I have enough information to know where everything's going to live, where all of my different elements, where is the light coming from? What direction is the light coming from? What is the sun doing? Those kind of things. So, of course, I have that somewhat predetermined most of the time. But I like to get my painting blocked off, because then I'm responding to just refining until it's done. As opposed to just trying to just make a coloring book. To me, that's kind of a little bit elementary school, It's like basic, it's like you're kind of like copying something. I'm not copying anything, I'm painting something. This is coming out of my mind space. This painting is coming out of my mind space. Yes, I do have some reference drawings that I've made. But they're just references. They kind of keep me grounded. It keeps the painting consistent. But what I'm also doing is, as painting ideas come to me, as techniques and things that I can do to make the actual thing look good as a painting come to me, I'm able to exploit those things, use those things, incorporate those things. And that's what makes the painting start to get exciting in terms of the artist making the painting. That's what makes your painting exciting, So, of course, I can't wait to start really. This is my preliminary color for the sky. I haven't even painted the sky yet. So once I start getting more of this painting evolved, that's when I can get into the real painting. Right now, this is kind of the foundation of the painting. So this is not really where the fun is yet. This is what I got to do to get to the fun. But it's still fun even getting into it. So that's kind of the technique I have in terms of the actual painting. And like say now what I'm doing is kind of thinking of elements, that's going in. I think what I'm going to do, I have this sign here that's going to be called, James River Colony to Tsenacommacah natives, Matoaka abducted 1614, whatever. just to kind of have built into the painting some explanation of the painting. Just like what I did with this painting here, I have meta nature here with ancient words on them to help tell somebody who's smart what's going on in that painting. Likewise with symbols on this one over here, I even have some of that in the Nipsey Tupac painting. You know, just to, you know, some things on that. As a matter of fact, let me see if I can hoist that paint up a little bit more. Get that paint up so we can see it a little bit better. More better, more better. Okay, so let me see if I can get this up higher. Maybe that could be seen better. So I have kind of like my paint trays, my paint table, you know, kind of far away. I usually don't have it this close. I usually have it further away, but I was doing some editing earlier on some videos, and so this is a multi-space I have that I do a lot of things with. A lot of times I have my art table this way. Kind of have it this way, but like I say, then I can just push it back and forward. But yeah. Okay, so okay, so I think what I need to do is update my palette. My palette's getting kind of dirty. So what I'm going to do is take a little time to get that updated. Okay, and so I'm just going to take some real quick time to, I don't know if you can see that better or not with that table like that. I don't know. Let's see, let me pull it this way. Let me get it more this way then. There we go. That's a little bit better. Can move this little guy back some more too. I have some of these little easels and tables on wheels, because it allows me a lot more flexibility in my studio. And so I can move things around, show and tell a little bit easier. Do a little bit better show and tell there. Okay. So I have my little glass palette here, and I'm just going to use some paper towels to kind of wipe off any oil paint there. Get a little bit clean. Then I get my palette knife, and I just one at a time take my colors off the palette knife and put them on my glass table. And what I'm doing is I'm resetting my palette, because sometimes your palette gets muddy and dirty. Colors start, you want to be able to mix the exact color on the palette that you want. Then also you want to be able to mix the colors perhaps even on the canvas. But you don't want the colors to arbitrarily just to start to be big puddles of muddy color on your palette, because that's kind of, you have more space that just starts to look brown and gray. And as you can see, my color palette is very bright. I like very good, nice, rich, intensified color. Especially I did it on this one. This one's more blue, this one's more orange and yellow. This one right here has got more variety in it. I have multiple colors in there. I kind of have some elements of gray, purplish gray, bluish gray. Then I have the green, because I have the grass of the green, and I have like a sunset Virginia sky in there. So I really like the color scheme that I have working in here. I just have to work into my shadows, get my darks darker, pop out my highlights more, and then bring my middle tones to where they need to do. Of course, sharpen everything up as I go. Get the details in there. So it's pretty good. I think by today, I think I wanted to be kind of mostly with this canvas blocked off. And I have quite a bit of this canvas blocked off. I mean, I still need to, you know, I have some feathers coming off of here, some more of the tomahawk that Tsenacommacah has. His hand, of course, this guy's spear thing needs to be, of course, I don't even have his rifle that he's using, and the staff of the flag. Of course, his feathers, and of course, working on his apron and then his collar, and then these little puffs that's on each end of his spear. Need to block that off, and maybe just work on some of these arrows a little bit, block that in some. But I should get that done today by the end of the day, so I'm glad about that. So that means I have the painting totally covered with oil paint. Then from that point, it's going to be a matter of just, again, going into one element at a time. Of course, I love working on musculature of anatomy, so working on him. There's a lot of things I need to do on him to fix him up some. So work on him quite a bit as well. Because those are my main characters. And of course, popping out Matoaka and John Rolfe and as slightly secondary characters, and slightly, these 5 characters are the main characters of the composition. But on the top level, him, Tsenacommacah, Tsenacommacah, John Rolfe, Matoaka, and Captain John Smith. So, of course, all the other warriors that's in here too. So, it's coming along. It's coming along in terms of just getting the foundation of this painting established. So, that's basically where I am now. I'm finishing up the foundation of this painting. And then what I'll start doing is building my modeling layer next. And of course my detail layer. Start working on that layer. Okay, then once I take all my colors off my palette and clean my palette, then I buff it dry so it's nice and dry. Paper towels. Then what I do is I go in, I put the colors back on, and just, if I need to, kind of, if a color is missing, because I start with white, then I go to cadmium yellow, light, and then cadmium yellow medium. Then I use yellow ochre. Then I go cadmium red. Then I go alizarin crimson. And then after I do alizarin crimson, see, I'm missing my burnt sienna, so I'm going to get my burnt sienna out. Is this burnt sienna? Yeah, this is burnt sienna. And put in some burnt sienna. I use that quite a bit. It's a fast drying color. I like to use it because generally by the time I get here the next day, that color is dry. Okay, and then I go from burnt sienna to raw umber. And then I go from there, I go to my greens, which I start with emerald green. Then I use viridian green. And then also I have cobalt teal, because I have a lot of that blue sky, what I call the Virginia kind of sky. Also, I see that sky sometimes in North Carolina as well. And so I put in teal blue, and then cobalt blue, and then I put in some ultramarine blue. So I have 3 different blues. I generally use 2 different greens. And it also, a lot of people say, you know, our fine artists say they don't use black, but I get tired of wasting all my colors trying to get a very dark tone. I'd rather just add like alizarin crimson to it, or ultramarine blue or something else to tint it to whatever, to get it kind of to where I want it. So it's not just this ugly black. But at the same time, I don't want to waste expensive colors trying to make a cheap color either. So there's an economic reason. Okay, and I forgot my Daxodon purple. So I'm just going to put that right beside the raw umber there, because I usually will put that just before I put on the black. After ultramarine blue, but I kind of forgot that. So then what I do is I put in my medium that I just mixed, which is 30% Galkit, 30% 20% linseed oil, and 50% Gamsol. I have that pre-mixed, and I put about a quarter of that in the bottom of my first cup that I clamp onto my easel. Then I put 100% Gamsol in the second cup. That's for cleaning my brushes. Like if I want to use the same brush tip, I mean I like the type of brush it is, but I don't want to change brushes. I just want to just maybe dip some of the, or wash some of the color off real quick. I use that cup for that. Or sometimes I just have too much oil. I just don't want that much oil going down right there. So I will dilute my 30% Galkit, 30% linseed oil by adding a little bit more. Okay, I have some random colors that's very dark, but I don't know what they are. But it's black with something else mixed in it. So I'm gonna put those on too with my palette knife. So I just rebuilt my palette. I have clean space in the middle. Then I have all of my separate, pure, clean colors around the peripheral. So that's pretty good. So I'm gonna put this down for now because I think I want to kind of reset my brushes a little bit too. And what I do is I don't clean them when I'm in the middle of a paint section. I just wipe off any excess paint with a paper towel that might be on them. Because essentially I'm going to use them with the same colors that's already in the brush. And if I was going to use a different brush, I would just simply grab another one of my mini brushes there. Again, you can't have too many brushes. Just can't have too many. It's always better to have too many brushes than not enough. But sometimes I could just paint a whole painting with just one brush. I mean, I used to do it when I was really, really poor painting. So definitely it can be done, but it's just a lot more, makes more work, more hassle, and then also you can't keep your colors clean and pure as easily with less brushes than you can with more brushes. So that's why I say you can't have too many brushes, because that means most likely you're never going to get your colors too muddy. However, there's a less likely chance of your colors getting too muddy. But what happens when you go to clean up at the end of the day, you might have an hour and a half washing brushes, not that long, maybe about 40 minutes or so, 45 minutes of washing brushes. But I'd rather just have like a 15, 20 minute brush washing session. Stick with about 5 brushes. But oftentimes you can't do that, you know, and I don't paint according to how lazy I am. I paint according to what's best for the painting. Okay, so now that I got my, 5 brushes actually I'm using, I'm going to see which ones I'm going to use to dive back into the painting. And I still have some places in his apron and his pelt there that I want to go ahead and take care of. So now that I reset my palette, I'm going to pick a good brush to do that with. And go in there and take care of some of that. And I'm going to mix a little titanium white with a little yellow, cadmium yellow light, and a little cadmium yellow medium, with a touch of cadmium red to get a really nice kind of peach color. And now I turned this into a peach color. It's not even white. I wanted to go in with white, but instead I'm going in with a peach color. So, all right. So now what I'm going to do is try to find some places I can use this peach color. Okay. There we are. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just grab some white and just use whatever tone that's in my brush. That's perfect. Now I'm going to go into some of these lighter areas in here, so I think I have the right color in my brush. Now these are like lighter areas in this pelt that I want to paint in here. one thing about painting in oil, it gives me time. You know, I could go the next day, and these oils would not be fully dry. What that gives me is an opportunity to, it gives me an opportunity to go in and continue to model in and blend in and add, change color to, and of colors and tones that I've previously put on. So just gives me a lot more time to consider the painting. It's not a rush. And then also you're not just nailed down with this little, you know, this little brush trying to just get a certain tone perfect. It's a different way to paint. To me, it's a more frustrating way to paint. And it's not as free. It's not as open to the intuitive, I should say. It's more technical painting. And I don't necessarily like to paint technical. Now, I do have technical stuff going on, and you could consider this technical painting, but I like to get to the point where the painting is kind of like kung fu, you know, like it's just automatic, you know. I just lock right into what I want, and as I feel the painting, it just starts to happen. So I like my painting technique to develop that way, because when it develops that way, first of all, it's more fun. And then second of all, the subconscious mind is drastically smarter than the conscious mind. It's just way smarter. And the stuff that you do on that level just comes out just so much better. I mean, I'm usually so much more pleased when I put down a certain brushstroke from that type of consciousness when I'm thinking about my painting, as opposed to coming from a consciousness of, okay, technically I'm going to make it exactly this tone, you know. Now I'm getting kind of very robotic with what I'm doing, and it's not as intuitive, and it doesn't give me the interest that I want. You can see also sometimes I paint with my finger. You know, it's a great little blend tool. You know, sometimes, especially when you're working with oil, because these oils can stay open for quite a bit of time. They can stay, when I say open, I mean they can stay blendable. They can stay, you know, so you can gradate. When I say blendable, I mean to gradate gently from one tone to the next. Also, you can mix in gestures and brushstrokes into brushstrokes and gestures you already have there to create some interesting, like, because a painting is a human thing. It's not a photograph. A painting should not look like a photograph. As technology advances, the last thing you want to do as an artist, is be competing with cameras and printers. Because as a human being, you can do certain things with your paint to make a much more interesting visual feast than a photograph that's basically taking chemicals that's exposed to light and exposing it different ways. I mean, you could use certain things in Photoshop to kind of play with this and play with that, but the Photoshop of the human brain using human tools is a very, very powerful thing once you learn to use that. And it cannot be replicated easily through artificial intelligence. So in that sense, no programmer will ever be able to come up with a program and make a filter that can figure out how to do the type of brushstrokes and painting strokes that I do in my painting. So, you know, as a painter that's smart, you don't ever want to get in a position where you're competing with technology, where you're competing with Photoshop, and you're competing with printers, you know, because who wants to be a human printer, you know? Printers, you can just take a digital camera. You don't even need to know how to expose anything like a photographer anymore. You just click the little button and the thing shows you exactly what the picture is like before you even paint the picture. I mean, before you even take the picture. I mean, in the old days, you didn't have any any screen on your camera that kind of told you whether or not the picture was exposed correct to the light. And you didn't have, if the autofocus or whatever you had at the auto exposure didn't work right, you found out whenever you developed it that it didn't work out. You know, that's too dark, too light, too whatever, you know. So now everybody's a photographer by default of technological advancements. So as a photographer, you don't want to compete with that, because you're going to always be trying to do something like that. And the equipment is going to be so that anybody can do very similar work to what you're doing. Now, when you're painting a fine arts piece like this, well, first of all, if you're going to get a plotter or a printer that can paint acrylic or latex or whatever, that can put this type of patina, and that's what you want to think about, is the texture, the patina that's on your painting, can put this down, and to put it down in such a way that makes just the abstract. If you was just to look at a close-up piece of the way you applied the paint, you know, looking at people like Vermeer and Rembrandt and people like that who painted that way, you're going to see a lot of things in the paint that just, wow, he just used that brush stroke to create that illusion, but that's not how a camera would do it. That's not how a printer would do it. Nope, that's how I do it. You know, that's the illusion that I can create. And that's the, that thing looks interesting. I mean, even if it wasn't a realistic painting, even if it was just an abstract painting, for example, it would look interesting if it was an abstract painting. It would look interesting if it's a realistic. I mean, that particular set of colors, that particular set of elements, the way it sits on the canvas is interesting. I don't even have to know about the content or the topic or the subject matter you're painting about. Something about that painting looks interesting. And so that is the human touch. That is what humans can do with the supercomputer that's in a human mind, that has intuitive, it has emotions attached to it, it has all these things that artificial intelligence can't do. It just can't do. And just that also by using your hands to actually paint it, there's a lot of mechanics that comes from being a human being that is going to be embedded in the painting, because you literally had to take this brush, apply it to the canvas, and push the paint into the canvas. You literally have to do that. And then you have to, you know, use your arms to paint that in such a way that it, you know, that it goes into on the canvas the way you want. Well, that's a very, very human thing to do, and it's a very and just you can see that recording of the way the artist chose to put that down in the paint. You can actually see, you know, did the artist go from up to down? Did the artist go from left to right? Did he dap? You know, those kind of. Did he dap the paint in? How did he put that paint in there? Oh, there's a record of it right there in the paint itself of exactly how he did. And your mind starts to get caught on some of those issues. Not necessarily just on, oh, that's a painting of Matoaka, that's a painting of this or that. But it's also, oh, but the way he did that to make that look like that, that's interesting. So that's what a printer can't do. And the fact that the paint does have a sculptural element to it. It actually can sit up off of the surface, have little ridges and gullies, and you can create textures with the brush. I mean, all these things make a painting interesting. And you can get canvas in a photograph. You can get a photograph with a canvas look. They can use a filter to make it more look like painterly. But what you can't actually get is the way the brush strokes go on, the thickness of the paint. The paint has, the paint might come out as a toothpaste consistency, or it might be a creamy pudding consistency, or it might be put on so thin that it looks like a film and you can't even tell. It just looks like a tone that's applied. Now, when you get into trying to paint like it's a tone, I think you start competing with the printers that's out there. And so why wouldn't somebody just get a picture, print it out to a certain kind of printer, and that's it? That's all they need. They don't need anything else. They don't really need your painting. But at the same time, there are some things that a camera just can't find. I mean, you cannot find this image, this scene, anywhere. I mean, there's people who have died. Native Americans don't even dress like this anymore. They dress like you and I. They go to Walmart, do their shopping, just places like that. So you're not going to find these images that exist anywhere. And if so, you're gonna have to get a costume designer. You're gonna have to get some actors. You got to pay them, and then you got to find the scene. You got to pay for the location, and then once you do that, you're gonna have to get them to reenact. They have to do a realistic job of it. Then you can take your picture. So the average person can't do that. Now you're in the realm of a fine arts photographer, which is the same thing as a fine arts painter, by the way. Because painters use photography nowadays quite a bit. So, and also, I don't know what photographers use painting, but painters definitely use photography quite a bit.